As bold as lions. As bold as lions.
As bold as lions.
As bold as lions.
You're listening to the As Bold as Lions podcast.
Well, hello and welcome to the As Bold as Lions podcast. Great to have you join me today. Just as I always hit record on these, on the record button on my GarageBand software that I'm recording through my MacBook computer. I always try to hit pause, literally, pause myself and just say, God, would you speak through this podcast? Would you, even though these are words that I've prepared and some things that I've scripted out, Lord, would you pray over and anoint and bless this? So just want to share that. I just felt led to share that. I always try to do that before I hit record, and sometimes I hit record and delete what I said and start over. But most of the time I try to just keep the whole thing running and go through as best as I can through the material that I have. And so, just welcoming you. If you're a new listener, an old listener, great to have you here. We are in the month of May as these next few episodes drop. I guess we call it that in the business. I got a new EP dropping. I got a new book dropping. I got a new, whatever, this lingo that I'm getting too old for. But, as these episodes go out, we're into May and summer is on the doorstep, which is crazy. Every year this seems like it goes by faster and faster. But this new series that, this episode begins today is going to cover 3 weeks. And kind of just going to try to get right down to business and get into material, because I know this could go a little bit longer today, especially this first episode as we're setting some things up here. But I want to just explain kind of the thought process behind the title that you see, the overarching stuff that's been on my mind title. I don't watch Jeopardy too much anymore. I know it's still on. I don't even watch the news too much anymore, or any local types of channels and stuff. But if you remember Jeopardy, there's usually this category that comes up from time to time called potpourri. It has a T in the word, but I think it's pronounced potpourri. And it's just kind of this random set of questions that I think they just didn't know what to do with, and they just kind of jumble up and throw it into that category. Anyway, this is kind of the potpourri month of the As Bold as Lions podcast. And I don't think I've really done something quite like this before, but I thought it'd be a good way to just kind of go into some kind of topical things for a few weeks. And it's kind of a mixture of some things, but there's some cohesiveness to it as well. And if you've been listening over the last month, especially April, you might be thinking, well, I thought last month was kind of that, just some random episode that didn't seem to really, we're kind of all over the place. That was a bit of a potpourri month too. And you'd be right. There's some new stuff, some old stuff that I kind of brought out of some blog posts and things that I had. So just to kind of fill April, and I wasn't really sure where to go with a series for April. So we did that, but this is a little bit more directive. I'd say it's potpourri that's sort of looking at hot button topics of the day. There could be so many things that we could talk about, that we could bring up. And just as a disclaimer, none of these things over the next few weeks, there's nothing that I claim to be an expert on. None of them are things that I'm like, I've done a lot of research here, and guys, I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express or anything last night. None of that. But I'm also mindful of some things that we need to at least be having a conversation about and just talking about. And so that's what I hope this this month is and what these topics are. Hopefully they're interesting. Hopefully they're things that aren't like, man, no, that's not even on my radar right now. If it's not, then that's great. It doesn't apply to you. That's maybe something you're not thinking about. But chances are one or two of these, maybe all three, are things that you're thinking about over the next few weeks, or at least get you to thinking about. Just one side note on potpourri. Does anybody remember the potpourri, like incense aroma pots? Because when I hear potpourri, I'm still drawn back to that. And I know my mom always had this thing around in the house that you put a candle under it and you get these, rich aromas and fragrances in the house. This was like in the 80s and 90s. So whenever I hear potpourri, I'm also like thinking beyond the Jeopardy category and just thinking of that. And that is such a random thought and just a rabbit trail that I don't want to go down. But maybe those still exist. I don't know. But anyway, that's just my last thought on potpourri before we dive in today. This first topic today, as you see the title, Christian celebrity culture, you might be intrigued by that. You might have just stumbled upon this and just thought, I want to hear more about this because I don't really know what this means. And it kind of seems like a kind of an oxymoron type of a phrase, Christian celebrity. Like, do those two things go together? And you might be thinking, well, is that even a thing? And to which that I would respond, yeah, it is. And just go out and open your Google or your search engine, your browser, and type in that phrase, Christian celebrity culture, and see what comes up. You'll get a bunch of search hits. There's a lot of podcasts out there, so there's other people you can listen to on this. There's blog articles. There's all kinds of things, but it is definitely a thing, and definitely something that I think is becoming more of a concern. So what is it? We can say that it exists, but what is it exactly? This is how I'm trying to define it, and this might be a little subjective. You can go from one person to the next, but I believe this term or this phrase reflects a rise in the mainstream culture's embracing of certain aspects of Christian culture. So the secular world embracing aspects of Christian culture. Might be a pastor, might be a musician, maybe it's a certain idea that's in the Christian realm or within the church, and then that aspect of culture, of the greater culture, then giving those figures or those ideas prominence, and along with that, sometimes celebrity status, much like it would give to actors or artists, entertainers, even politicians that sometimes have this sort of just kind of image and everything, kind of a celebrity type of mindset with things that are sort of from the faith world, the Christian faith world. And it is a real thing. And here's how I know. You can kind of check me on this here. You can click on, and I just said I don't watch a whole lot of TV, local, or the old ABC, NBC, CBS, all that. But you can click on just about any of those on any given week, and a daytime talk show like the Today Show or Good Morning America, Fox News, things like that. Or you could go to your local supermarket in the checkout aisle and pick up an issue of People magazine or something along those lines. And sooner or later, you're going to come across a name, a person, somebody that you recognize that you'd say, that's I know that person from the church world, the quote unquote church world. Now, is this necessarily a bad thing? Is this in and of itself bad that we have people that are popping up more and more on these platforms? And I'd say no, not in and of itself. It's not necessarily bad. And I'm going to get to more of that as we go. But the point is, I guess for me, I'm old enough to remember growing up in the 80s and the 90s especially. It wasn't too long ago that there was a time where really the greater culture didn't want to have much to do with anything church related. And especially in terms of entertainment value or things like that. And some of it I get because, we always have this mindset of like, the church has put out really poor quality movies and poor quality music, and it just doesn't have the standard and the caliber of what the Hollywood or, the record industry, all those things that we can kind of compare and say, well, it's not really apples to apples, because the church is putting out, for lack of a better word, and here's another one that kind of ages me, a cringy type of substance and of material, if you know what I'm talking about there. And so that's just kind of a general blanket statement. I won't say that applies in every scenario, but at least as I've grown up over, the last 40 years or so, I've seen this where, all of a sudden the culture is more interested in what's going on in the church, or is picking some of these people out to say, we want to use this person, we want to showcase this person, and it just kind of has me saying, why is this happening? Why the change over time? Is it a good thing? Are we gaining then a foot in the door and getting access to wider audiences where then Christ is being displayed and the gospel is going forth? If so, great, thumbs up, let's go, let's do that. Or is it a mixture of the culture kind of stepping into the church and having more of a say in some aspects there? And it's kind of bringing, it's not necessarily leading people to Christ, but it's putting these people on display and making kind of celebrities out of them, and maybe not really getting anywhere in terms of advancement of the gospel. Going to be different viewpoints on that. So today I'm trying to unpack some points that as I've been thinking about this, and this is something like I've been thinking about for probably a few years now. And it just it's just been steadily growing within my own heart and my own mind of like, how do we deal with this? How do we kind of wrestle with this? And you may not agree with everything that I'm going to say, and that's fine. You may just need to kind of listen to it and formulate your own opinion, and that's great. If I was able to make this more of a live thing and kind of Q&A it and have some more back and forth, that probably would be helpful. But for those who may just have questions or want to express your own opinions, maybe have some debate over this, I'm open to that. I'm not going to just say, hey guys, this is the way it is, and there's no, I'm open to feedback. I'm open to just growing through that. I like to get that, honestly. But the series in general, this stuff that's been on my mind, kind of throwing together some things, there is some purpose and intentionality behind it, and I want that to be seen kind of over above even everything that we're dealing with and talking about. And like I said before, I want to get us talking and thinking. And I think in taking the time to think about things, we're then taking the time to understand the greater issue of what it is we believe. What is it that we believe? What's the bedrock and the foundation? And then applying that to the things that we're dealing with. God, He gives us the ability to think and to reason, logic. He gave us a brain, and He gives us His word. And I believe that His word goes forth and it will never return void. It's going to accomplish what He wants it to do. And bottom line, He gives us the ability to know and articulate the gospel, which comes through knowing His Son, Jesus Christ. So that's where I'm at. And I know this is all just kind of a lengthy intro to set things up. Still have a lot to get into, just to kind of dissect this a little bit more, but that's where my head's at, and hopefully you sense the thought behind it, the heart behind it, and that it's driven by humility as well. It's not coming from a place of pride, but it is out of concern for where are we headed and what does this mean as we look at this topic. So the first point I have today is just to basically point out some facts. And that is the rise of the quote unquote platform has given rise to what we call Christian celebrity culture. I have a verse here. It's Matthew 6:1. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. So, kind of an understatement, but social media has influenced so much of what we see and what we perceive as a society. And that's just kind of a type of a statement here. But social media is just, it's part of everything now. It's really the format for mass communication. I was going to say it's a new format, but it's not really new anymore. It's just kind of, we've had it for quite a long time now, and it's probably our chief way to communicate. Talked about not watching the news too much anymore, standard television, things like that. There's so much that I get from social media that just kind of leaves all that behind, at least for me, and probably even way more for the ages younger than me. And so social media, is also this instantaneous but constant drip of information. It's crazy to me that I can go on Instagram or Facebook and I can kind of be scrolling through a few things, kind of get bored with what's on my feed and then pull that whole feed down and refresh it. And then, it's like Facebook or Instagram's like, oh, you don't really like what you're looking at? Here's a whole new set of things for you to think about. And that's going on everywhere, on everybody's phone at any given time, that we have this access to just continually refresh and reset and be like, well, I want to see this. Now I want to see that. And that this is what's going on. And we're just kind of constantly stimulated by all of these things, this constant feed of information. And it's scary because we can stay in that world all day long and just kind of just continue to get that hit. Some people talk about the dopamine hit that people get from being on social media, from chasing the likes and the shares and all that stuff. It's a real thing. Like, it's a real addiction that it can get to. Anyway, all that aside, that's another topic, another stuff that's been on my mind podcast. Isn't one that I'll do, but it could be. But this social media presence, the platform that we now have given to so many people, it gives us access to influencers. I'm going to use that term sometimes, and that's just people kind of with sway and persuasion, especially as we're talking about Christian people. And it gives us access to them that we just haven't had in the past. I can remember, like I said, child of the 80s, 90s, and taking these a Christian music fan, taking the time to mail a letter, like a handwritten letter with a stamped envelope, and sending it off to some of my favorite bands and artists back in that time frame. And you'd have these cassette tapes, or you had CDs. This, for the younger generation, you're like, what is that? I can go into more detail at some other time, but you take those things out, and usually somewhere in there you'd find like an address, or like even like they'd say like, hey, the fan club, join the fan club, or mail us at this address or whatever. So I'd take that and I'd send something off to them, and usually it was just kind of this, hey, I'm a big fan, kind of this flowery thing where I'm just trying to, my end goal was to get something, but I'd say like, I'm a fan. I love your music, love what you're doing. And then be like, is there any way I could get something from you guys, like an autographed picture or something? And, I got stuff from bands that I follow, like Petra and Newsboys, and, just all kinds of artists that I was into. Got into a lot of heavier, like Christian rock and metal bands and things like that. And, that would hear from these guys and just thought, man, this is so cool. Like, this is a connection to these people that I've never been able to have. And I still have a picture of Petra that's signed in my office to this day that just kind of reminds me of that love that of Christian contemporary music, CCM, and all that going back. It just kind of started in those, I guess, late elementary to junior high school years. And, we had that for a number of years. And then with the advent of email, you could just shoot an email off to a band or an artist and just, kind of dote upon them again and be like, man, I'm a big fan, whatever. Now, with social media, the digital age, just kind of stepping into full picture, you can just post about that person. I can post, here's my concert video that I took of, I'll just say, DC Talk. I know they're not around anymore, or maybe Toby Mac. Let's say that. So here's the video of that, and I take Toby Mac and I say, man, I'm love this concert at X, Y, and Z place. Awesome. Here's a little song that he did. And so then that artist may then see that, or their media team or whatever. It's probably not the artist, but somebody in their team takes it and they might like the post, or they might even comment, or, even better, they take your post and they share it on their page. And it's like, whoa, that's a big deal. Like that went from just my little moment of filming this person and then sharing it and then going out to all these people. And it's just like really cool if that happens. Anyway, that's kind of where we're at now of this social media ability. And, I get that we find that cool if it's like a Hollywood person or if it's like a Christian type of person. Like we just find that cool. If Tom Cruise commented on your post, like, wow, that would be amazing, right? But the problem is, as I step back from that, is that over time, we've seen these platforms kind of grow bigger and bigger, and the followings then in the hundreds of thousands to millions, and at some point, people realize there's money to be made here. There's something to be made by having these platforms, these followers. It's a business, and we can sell things. We can sell tickets. We can sell merch. We can sell records or get people to stream things. The publishers, the labels get into it, the promoters, the churches, artists. And so it becomes this huge thing. We understand that. We know that's kind of gotten there, but the money thing is the big part of it. And I guess in this first point, which is kind of long here, but as we've seen the rise of the platform, one thing I think we have to do, it doesn't matter if you're just a small, independent guy like myself or all the way up to some big name, is that we have to handle the platform carefully, both as the influencer and the influencee, the one who is the follower. And I have to ask this myself, am I following people for the right reasons? The people that I hit that follow button on or even choose to share their stuff, am I following them for the right reasons? Or as I see things that maybe seem kind of off, or they're doing things with motives that I don't quite think are the right place, something just seems there's a check in my spirit about things. Am I willing to say, hey, I don't know if I agree with that? Kind of the call them out in love. Or maybe even easier and just simpler for ourselves is just to hit unfollow and be like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to keep putting that in front of my on my Facebook feed or whatever. And yeah, I think we probably have all done that. We've followed something and then we've thought, I don't really know if I want to keep following this anymore. And we do that. But how do we do that with a spiritual intent? We may follow something because that we were initially drawn into them, that person or whatever. Is that still true over time as a platform or some sort of social media page as it grows? Are we still kind of following them because they're following after Christ, kind of to put it that way? And is the desire to point to Christ still there, no matter if they have 10 followers or 10,000 or 100,000 or how many ever? I'm going to end this point by just sharing this. There's an article online, John Piper famous pastor, desiringgod.com. The article is titled, "Is it sinful to seek fame online?" They're responding to a question that somebody had raised, and just a very articulated response. But this one quote stood out to me. He says, "Yes, it is a sin to want to be famous." Just matter of fact, there it is. "However, it may not be a sin to want to be influential." Catch that. "In fact, it may be a sin not to want to be influential. We should want to win more and more people to Christ." So Piper's saying, if your goal is just to get big and famous and have the mansion, the nice car, the packed stadiums, and just get that, sinful. It's not in line with what God wants you to do. But if your goal is to be influential, then that's where we need you. That's where I need to be. And it's not a sin to be or to want to be influential if we're doing it in a way where we want to influence others for Christ. So platforms can be a good thing if they're used to steer people to Jesus and not simply to bring them to ourselves. That's the first point. Then the rise of the platform has kind of brought us to this point where we're even having this discussion about Christian celebrity culture. Second point, the stage has become a place where God worship and idol worship are mixed. Deuteronomy 5, 6, and 7. "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me." That's part of the 10 Commandments. And so this point about the stage, and specifically thinking a lot about church right now, but even, think about where you maybe would watch your favorite artist or listen to your favorite pastor or author or speaker or whatever. That place has become, in many ways, a place where, yes, God is worship, but yes, there is this idol worship that seems to kind of exist as well. And I'm sensitive to that because I'm in worship ministry, and I've done music related things probably for the last 20 plus years. And I've seen firsthand how the stage, which is a literal platform, not social media platform per se, but a literal platform, that can be a place where we worship what is on that stage or what happens on that stage rather than where it should be pointing us to. And it can be easy to be tempted or just follow those motives that are not focused on Christ, that are focused on ourselves. Each week, leading worship, that temptation is real. I'll tell you firsthand, it's real to say, make it about yourself, make it about who you are, make it about how you sound, make it about this or that. No, I got to keep putting it back on you, Jesus. I'm just a vessel to lead these people, and that's all I want to be. But in this aspect of the church, just kind of going further with this, do we also set in place various means that allow this celebrity worship to take place? Beyond the stage itself and what's going on the stage, is this question I have, who are we when we're off the stage? What if we're away from the public view? What do we look like? Do we have integrity and character in those situations? There's a person that I follow on social media, speaking of influencers, and her name is Natalie Runyon, Runion. She's becoming a pretty famous speaker and author, but she's got some great stuff, and her page is titled Raised to Stay. Check her out. I kind of found it through happenstance. It's kind of probably a suggested thing, or somebody else shared something from her and then checked out what she was about because it piqued my interest. But she's had various experiences in the church as a worship leader, and she's seen kind of the other side of things, and sometimes has to poke at some of these things that we do in the church, even some of these, what I would call graven images that we cling to, those idols that we need to abolish because they're standing in the way of ourselves or of bringing other people face to face with Jesus. So she addresses something that's called the green room within the church. And if you don't know, a green room is this space where it's kind of a waiting room and a lounge area where before, after a performance, maybe even sometimes during a performance, when somebody's not engaged on stage, they might be back in the green room. They might just be hanging out in that space. Typically, it's backstage and it's furnished. It's got couches, maybe some food, maybe some TVs, you name it. But within the church, Natalie Runyon raises this question about having green rooms. These are things that not just at your local arena or theater or those types of places. They're within the church as well. She says this: by separating those on the platform from those they serve beside on staff and those they serve on Sunday morning, we are contributing to a celebrity culture that implies those on the platform are more special or more tired than those working the same hours in the same trenches in ministry. See, we'll give the worship team kind of their space to just unwind. They get done with their set. They go to the green room. They sit down. They just kind of nap or whatever. And you've got the children's ministry team, in the trenches out there. You've got the welcome team. You've got the hospitality team, the coffee team. But you've got the worship team kind of like, all right, I did my thing and I'm going to chill here in the green room. This is a real thing. And something that she poked at, and she honestly got a lot of pushback from people on this and could tell that was then probably something that needed to be said because people are clinging to that like it's their idol. And I do believe it can feed into this celebrity status that we're trying to avoid. And I know I'm going a little bit back and forth here, kind of on this micro level and this macro level. We're talking about the local church and the local kind of celebrity person versus the big, well-known, nationwide, big tour, kind of that guy. But here's what I think is common to both of them and why this green room discussion is relevant. The church at any level can have an identity problem with those that it decides to put on the stage. In some ways, we've given these people the leeway and the capacity to grow these bigger and bigger platforms, and they have all this influence, and we're saying, well, it's for the body and it's for reaching the lost, and it's ultimately all for the Lord. If the platform gets bigger, if the reach gets bigger, if they go on this show, if they go, sign with this person, it's all for reaching more people. When sometimes it's simply just about our own egos and it's about our own pocketbooks. And that's, again, you can push back on me, but I'm gonna say there's a lot of that going on. And at this macro level, just talking about a band that had a song back in the day that, as I'm talking about songs and things that I identified with in my coming of age years, the group DC Talk. On their Jesus Freak album, they had this song, What If I Stumbled? If you remember it, it opens with these lyrics. Is this one for the people? Is this one for the Lord? Or do I simply serenade for things I must afford? You can jumble them together. My conflict still remains. Holiness is calling in the midst of courting fame. This tension of like, am I doing this for myself? Is this for myself? Is this to get me more money, more stuff, more fame, more accolades? Or is this for you, Jesus? Is this for your fame? Is this for your glory? And that's the tension. And that's where really a big part of this conversation just stems from, is that are we going down this road by putting Christians on certain platforms and propping them up and making them out to be maybe bigger than they should be? Maybe it's just a humbling thing that we just have to say, hey, at the end of the day, he's a sinner, she's a sinner, we're all sinners, but we're saved by grace. And as a side note, I haven't tried to mention a lot of names or call anybody out, but man, that band DC Talk, which I loved, which sang that song back in 1995, which was prophetic in some ways. Kevin Max of that band, he now identifies as an ex-evangelical. And he says he now follows the quote-unquote universal Christ. He's deconstructed his faith. He now follows a false gospel. And he's from one of the bands that was probably the most influential out of the last 20 to 30 years in this industry. And that's crazy. 1/3 of the band is this guy, and he's gone down this path. So it will tell you what celebrity Christianity at any level can lead us to a worship of something other than God. The stage is a place where we cannot mix the worship of him with the worship of anything else. My last point today, and I know this is a longer episode, I thank you for hanging with me, is this. It's kind of an action point. We take down this giant of celebrity Christian culture by giving credit where it is due. I'm going to take a drink and keep going here. Psalm 9, verses 1 and 2. I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. I will recount all your wonderful deeds. I will be glad and exult in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. One thing as I was going through Bible school, and to this day it served me well. It's one thing I heard that I just was in a chapel message one day. It was simply this: give credit back to where it's due. Give credit back to the Lord. We all like to receive words of affirmation. We like to get kind of that praise and just that, scratch on the back, which just says, hey, great job. You're doing it. And if you're on the receiving end or the giving end of those words, there's nothing, again, inherently wrong with that. Over time, however, as we start to intake that without putting it back somewhere, those words can just contribute to our own thinking we're a big deal, thinking we're more than we are. We have to allow those words to go back to our Heavenly Father. And we take down this giant that we're talking about by giving the credit back to him. This is really where I see this breaking down, this celebrity culture. And whether we're talking about the local church or something bigger, it's something we got to keep talking about. Are we quick to give God the glory in all these things? Do I ever steal some of that glory for myself? Again, I haven't tried to name a lot of names today because I don't want to call out tons of people and just kind of be like, hey, avoid this or avoid that. That's some personal decisions that you need to take prayerfully through all of this, whatever you decide to do with your time. But it's really a trend that I think we're seeing more of. Rather than saying specifically people, here's some things some practical things that I kind of try to take into this discussion, that as I see them, they're yellow or red flags. They're a yellow light or a red light, moving me to think, okay, what's going on here with this person? Are there some concerns? And a lot of stuff is out on social media or is just captured now, video or quotes or whatever. Sometimes things are out of context, so we got to dig into that. But here's just a list of some things that I'm mindful of, and maybe this is helpful for you. When we're listening to people that are doing interviews and they're just talking about whatever, and you can go through a whole interview and maybe, this kind of get this feel about the person from that interview, and then you go to the next one and it's just more of kind of the same, and it's really more about who they are and not really that much about Jesus, especially when they're going in front of a mainstream audience. Pick up that issue of that magazine and read the interview with that person. Do you get the sense that that person is trying to say anything about who Jesus is through them? For me, if there's nothing really there, that's a red flag. Another one that concerns me is when I go onto somebody's social media page and it's just post after post about themselves. And it's a lot of here's a glamour shot of me doing whatever. Here's a selfie of me, or here's, just post after post of that. And maybe once in a while, a little Jesus, but more so here, look at, this is the amazing thing I'm doing here. And here's the amazing thing I just did last night. And here's what's coming up that's next. That's amazing. And I know there's record labels and there's radio and there's all these other things involved. And sometimes The media teams, they're controlling a lot of this, but still an issue for me if it's really more about that person. And I can look at a Taylor Swift page, which I haven't. I'm sorry, I won't go into Taylor Swift, but I can kind of see who she's about through all the posts that she has. And then I go over to, Christian celebrity person over here, and it's basically identical to what each other would be posting. If I see that, that's another red flag. To me, that's concerning. Maybe it isn't for you. Maybe there's more nuances to talking about that, but that's another thing that I'm just like, why is it always about themselves and there's not a whole lot else there? Okay. These are some practical things, but they're not easy to talk about, but I'm going to keep going. When an artist or an influencer partners with someone, and maybe I'm thinking more in the secular or mainstream world, and there's no mention of Jesus, there's no mention of their faith, there's no mention of the gospel, that's an issue. Seen that before. Sometimes that seems like just, hey, I'm trying to make inroads and trying to share the gospel. Great. We want to know that. We want to see that. But sometimes that's the first step of them leaving Christian music, leaving the church, because they got kind of their big break with, this big name. And now they're going totally down that world. I'm not going to name names, but I can think of a few who have done that over the last few years. And it's sad. It's like, man, you had an influence here. This door opened up for you and you said, bye-bye. I'm chasing that dollar. Anyway, that's one more. And again, I know that some of this is opinion here. These are some trends though that I've seen. And more often than not, I believe the Holy Spirit is exposing something. And then way back when something seemed off, something didn't quite sit right, but it's like that there was an issue. Last one I have of these kind of practical things to look at. What's the fruit? Where's the fruit? Look at the pastor, look at the artist, look at the author, the influencer. What's coming from them? And Jesus speaks of recognizing false prophets. This is in Matthew 7:15 and 16. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but are inwardly ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. I don't think it's a stretch to say that those who are kind of in this Christian celebrity, caught up in this, are in essence false prophets. Okay, email me if you disagree, but I think a lot of them are allowing that influence to not point to Christ and to not have the fruit that they need to be showing. What is the fruit of their doing? Is it just a business? Is it about money? Is it about more followers? Is it getting more exposure? Is it getting people to come to events and purchase things? Are people coming there with a hunger to know Christ, or are they wanting to share Christ so other people would then follow him and grow in their walk to point people to Jesus? At the end of the day, the folks on the stage, the ones on the platform, they have to stand before the Lord to account for what they have done. And we understand that, all of us will, not just this person who's a big deal over here, but all of us. But those who gave the praise and the glory back to God, those ones who surrendered and were humble with what they were given, those are the ones who understand that he raises and lowers kings and kingdoms, and he can give and take away platforms. The platform God gives anyone, that's not the problem itself. The problem comes with how we use it. And really, as Christian consumers, and I don't like that term, but I'm using that because I think we can understand what that means. As Christians who consume things, we have the responsibility to then hold folks accountable and to perhaps even turn off or unfollow when it's something that this looks like idol worship. This looks like self-worship. This looks like a false gospel. I'm not going to keep following it. So guys, I know that's a lot. I know this is probably one of my longer episodes, as this is clocking in at about 40 some minutes right now, but I just felt like this is an important one to share, as I've been just kind of churning this over in my mind and thinking about it and just saying, God, I want to share this stuff that's been on my mind, and hopefully there's something good that comes of it, and maybe it's just even just having more discussions and going further with this. But people are talking about this out there. People are recognizing that kind of this brand of American Christianity is tied into almost a Hollywood sort of path right now, and it feels off to me sometimes. It feels like we're not, if Paul was here today, what would his Christianity look like within this context? I don't think it would be much different than what it looked like, in first century AD. I think Paul would still be out there preaching the gospel and probably be getting kicked out of places because they don't like him, and probably wouldn't have a ton of followers because he wouldn't be just sharing all the wins of everything that he's doing, because man, it's hard out there. But Paul's the one I want to follow. Paul, an example like that, who follows Christ. Ultimately, Christ is the one I want to follow. So hopefully this gives you things to think about. And I know this is starting out pretty heavy, and in the direction that we could have gone in this area, we could have gone in different paths, but I felt like this is where I needed to go with this topic today. But pray through this on your own. Consider how it applies to your own walk. And then again, reach out with questions or things you might even disagree with me on. I'm open to talking some more. You can reach me at info@derekcharlesjohnson.com. Guys, hope the rest of your day, the rest of your week is blessed. And I just want to leave you with Ephesians 5:15-17. This is the theme verse for everything that I do as bold as lions. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. And guys, pray for these folks, okay? Because it's easy to point out things. It's easy to talk about things. But are we praying for them? And that's something I should have led with, but I felt like, man, I need to say that at the end. Pray for your pastors. Pray for your worship leaders on the micro level, on the macro level. Pray that God uses them mightily. Take care. God bless.
Hey guys, this is Derek Charles Johnson. You have been listening to the As Bold as Lions podcast. I am a blogger, a songwriter, an artist. And if you've been encouraged by this podcast, please go ahead and subscribe and share, and head over to derekcharlesjohnson.com for more encouraging content. God bless.